Eyelines. Eyelines are very tricky. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, eyelines is basically where is a character looking. And the thing that makes it tricky is that there will be times when you want a character to look at something, and if you try to get it right, perfect, they won't look like they're looking at it. So, for example, let's create a cube here. And I want this character to look at this cube. And just to make this a little easier, I'm going to create a new camera. And we're going to use this to frame up on the character's face here. Okay, so I've got a cube here. Now, if I want her to look at this cube and really feel like she's looking at it, sometimes that eyeline isn't going to quite work. So if I have her kind of looking over here, let's say she's looking up over there, and I want her to turn her eyes to the cube. Whoop. Now I'm going to put this eye control right in the cube, right here. But does it look like she's looking at the cube right now? Not really. One eye kind of does. The other eye looks like she's kind of got hit in the head a little too hard and is starting to roll back like it's a glass eye or something. It's not working, but it's looking directly at it. Well, there's two things to keep in mind here. One is, in real life, our eyes don't move perfectly symmetrically all the time. When you get to extreme rotations, one eye might move a little bit more than the other. So this eye might actually be rotating further out than the other one to keep that alignment because of our nose and because of our head shape. It's a little change, but it is there. It's not perfectly in sync. The second thing is look at the size of these characters' eyes. The bigger and more cartoony the eyes are, the more that little shift needs to be exaggerated because the eyes are bigger. It's also bigger eyes means that technically, these eyes shouldn't work in real life, just their positioning and whatnot. So we have to start breaking certain rules to make them feel like they work. It's just exaggeration. It's like characters that have huge muscles, like think He-Man. He-Man, if you've ever seen He-Man from the original classic series, he's a big muscular guy. At his size and the muscle mass that he would need to be that size, he's about 6'6", I think approximately. He would be 700 pounds to be that size in real life. 700 pounds of muscle. That doesn't work. But in the cartoon, when you animate him and you see him, it's like, yeah, totally. It looks cool. It could work in real life. But we make it work. We make it look like it can work. So in this case, the character's eyes are huge. In real life, that they actually wouldn't work properly the way they are here. But we have to make it feel like they do. So with eye lines, what it really is just making it feel like it's right. And there's no real trick to it. There's no like, oh, you just do this and it's gonna work. It's what looks good. So in this case, I want her to look at this box. Well, this eye is looking into her own head right here. So I'm gonna have to pull that out a little bit. So pull that out just a little here. And essentially what I'm going to need to do is just make sure that they feel like they're working in the same direction. So even that already helps. One thing I'm feeling is that, let's zoom in here. This eye kind of feels a little higher than the other. That's because the head is tilted, but the eye control isn't. Isn't there a new He-Man series on Netflix? Yes, and the trailer looks amazing. Check out the trailer, it's so good. I love He-Man. So the eyes, this eye feels a little too high because I've tilted the head, but the eye control hasn't tilted with it. So I'll rotate this, create that kind of line so that the eyes line up with the angle of the head here. Okay, is that better? Yeah, that feels a little bit better. And actually, let me just put the character on high res mode so we can get some better shapes in there. There we go. So it's really just making it feel like it looks in the correct direction. And like I said, there's no big rule for this because eye directions are very susceptible to change and to the character. So for example, see, this is what happens when you just reset things randomly. So actually, this is a good example. You can see that this control, I moved that one eye way out. Look what happens when I bring it close. Ugh, a little weird. If I bring this further out, now it looks fine. Depending on how far that control is, it's going to make adjustments change very drastically. So you might need to readjust things quite a bit based on where your controller is, where the characters are, where they're supposed to be looking, based on, whoa, don't go back like I did there. Based on who this character is. So for example, if you look at a lot of characters, especially characters that are supposed to be slightly cuter and more innocent, what ends up happening is that their eyes are crossed slightly. Vanellope von Schweetz in Wreck-It Ralph has this a little bit. Lots of the Disney princesses have it. Lots of the cute characters have these slightly crossed eyes. So if you actually look at her eyes here, they are in towards her eye, or into the center here. If you actually look at a human eye, when we're looking forward, you've got the eye shape, eye shape here. The pupil tends to sit into the center here, right there, and right under the lid, right there. So you have something like this. So it's right in the center. You've got white on this side, white on this side. If we go full screen here and I look forward, let's look at the camera. See how, all right, see, get my head straight. There we go. If I look straight, see how you can see white on both sides of the eye? Right there. Even on both sides. That's because I'm looking straight and even. If we look back at our character here, is there an even amount of white on both sides of the eye? No. Now, just to kind of help make this a little clearer, I'm going to shape the eye, make them a little rounder. Look at that. There, she's cross-eyed right now. But it still looks okay. If I wanted to make this more naturalistic, her eyes would have to be out here. But doesn't that look a little wall-eyed now, where she's kind of looking out in two different directions? Technically, this is more correct. We're getting even spacing on both sides, but we're losing that appeal. And this really changes on your character. What's a good example? Was it Mitchell's versus the Machines? So if you look at Mitchell's versus the Machines, let's look at some images here. Look at the size of the pupils on her eyes. Huge. This is kind of the typical Disney size of the eye. Really big pupils. Look at Mitchell's versus the Machines. Look how small the pupils and the iris are in the eye. It's a tiny little dot in all of this white. Stylistic choice. What does all of this mean? It basically means that there is no rule to eye line. It's whatever looks best. Whatever looks best at that camera angle, at that lens length, at that moment that makes it feel like the character is actually looking in towards where you want them to look. That's the big thing. So the eyes on the dog though, yeah, it's cute. So for example, I could actually shrink her pupils here, an iris, like that. But suddenly, does this character look cute? Not as much. Part of that is the eyes are perfectly centered. If you actually look at... Did I close it off? Yes, I did. If you look at the Mitchells versus the Machines here, look at where their pupils are. They're crossed and slightly lower. They favor the lower half of the eye here. That makes it feel off-center and interesting. The moment that these eyes are centered, it's just creepy. But let's see if we can kind of capture that a little bit of Mitchell's versus the Machines feel here. So cross the eyes a little bit and then keep them a little lower. We're going to raise the eyelids here just a little bit, and we get something like that. Now we can kind of push the brows up a little bit and start posing the face so it's not quite so dead looking. And we start to get something a little bit more appealing. It would take a little bit more work, but it's just shaping the eye. Already this looks less like creepy, just dead, because we've crossed the eyes and pushed the spacing of the white a little bit more. Even just bringing it down a little bit more helps. Let's see. Does every character that you want to be cute need the eyes to be slightly crossed? No. For example, look at the dog. He's definitely very cute. But look at those eyes. They're off in two different directions. So it's not a rule. It's just kind of a generalization, is that eyes that are slightly crossed tend to be more appealing and cute because it kind of brings the character's focus in. The more they're out, the more it kind of feels like dead-eyed a little bit. But there's a point where it becomes cute again, depending on the character's design. Like, look at that. Oh, definitely looking in two different directions. So, in terms of eyeline, unfortunately, I can't give like a specific topic. The big thing to watch out for is how much white is on each side. So for example, if I look at the inside white here, is that the same as on that side? And it's not perfect because I can have her look over to the side, so this way. But I want to make sure that if she's looking to the side, the amount of white over here is similar over there. Not exactly the same, but maybe something like that. So I'm looking at that negative space in the white. This eye isn't quite touching the corner. I don't want this one to be touching into the corner here, because now it kind of creates this slight offset. Now, is that a hard and fast rule? No, because it depends on their head angle. If the camera is turned further this way, the nose is going to get in the way before that eye gets too far. So again, no hard, fast angle or hard and fast rules. It's just what's going to work best for this situation. And honestly, the best thing to do is look up other films. So your animated character, let's say a character similar to the Mitchells versus the Machines here. Okay, how do they make these really appealing eye poses? Take a look at it. See if you can recreate it. Let's actually go in here and we're gonna try to kind of recreate a little bit of this eye pose from the kid. So he's looking up. I can take the eye controls here and maybe... do I want to push the squash and stretch? I was thinking maybe scaling the eye a little bit. Just a little higher. Let's round them out. So start shaping the eye. The kid has very, very round eyes. So I want to round out this design as much as I can. Now we're not going to get this exactly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we could be here all day just talking about eyes. But if I round this out here, and then the other eye, same thing. Let's push that up here. And kind of push that shape. Yeah, we're starting to get a better shape there. So I'm gonna have to push this rounder here. Okay. So I'm just trying to get rid of the corners as much as I can. We start to get something that's just a little bit kind of cuter here. Or I shouldn't say cuter, that's not the right word. It feels like it works better. So let's kind of push that eye even higher here. Really have her kind of pushing up there. This eye, push the shape a little bit more. Right in there. So something like that. A little bit more appealing. Now if I push the brows in there as well, we're going to start really pushing the appeal because, well, if we don't push the brows, the character kind of looks a little dead. So something like this. So I just took a show and okay, how do they make that appealing? Tiny pupils, and we push the shape of the eye. Now I could take much more time to do this. I'm doing this very roughly. But we get something like that. And I could push the mouth shapes and all of this stuff. But you are learning from what works in another film. So with that, let's see, what effect does it give off when the eyes are pointed out slightly out? Usually it creates the effect of a character that is kind of lost in thought, where there is kind of, they've zoned out, where they're just watching and you hear the dial tone like a beep and their eyes are starting to point out and they're not really focused on anything. It creates the feeling of a character that might not be super intelligent, or it creates the feeling of unease. So it's like when the eyes are just slightly, not a lot, very wide, just slightly out, it creates the feeling that a character isn't looking at you. Like they're just looking past you and not really looking at you. And if someone's talking to you like that, it kind of makes you uneasy. Whereas bringing them in adds that focus. So when you have a conversation with someone, it feels like they're talking to you a little bit more than when the eyes are starting to go out. Part of that is the closer something is, the more your eyes will cross. The further it is, the more your eyes straighten. So if you have a conversation, usually that's something pretty close, which means your eyes are going to be ever so slightly crossed when you have a conversation. Not a lot, but just like shifted ever so slightly. Let's see. Now, when you're animating two eyes, that's what you usually animate. One thing I always try to do is, I did this for demo purposes here. I don't ever try to animate both of these separately along with the main controller. What I will do is I will almost always just use the main control to move one eye. So I'll animate, for example, the screen right eye using this one. And then I will use the other control to realign the one that I'm not using. So I'm only ever using two controls. The moment I start using three, like this, that's when you start getting into a lot of counter animation. It gets really weird. So that's the way I try to avoid getting just slippery eyes where they're just sliding around all the time. Now, there was another question about follow a line. So follow a line with eyes is basically, are the eyes going to stay in place or are they going to follow the head? So as I move the head, you can see the eyes stay still. Or should we turn this on so as she's looking at something, the eyes lock, which looks a little creepy when it's pointed towards the camera. Which one should you use? Honestly, it depends on the situation. So if I'm looking at the camera here and I turn my head, you'll notice that my eyes stay locked on. So in this case, I would turn follow a line on so that as I'm animating the character, I can twist their head and all of this stuff, and they stay locked in perfect. But what if I have a character that's just kind of not really paying attention and they're doing this? See how my eyes aren't locked on anything? As I'm moving, they follow along with my head. So if my character isn't focused or is just kind of thinking to themselves, I'll turn that off so that it sticks with the head and it makes it easier and I'm not having to like drag the eyes around all the time. It really just depends on what I'm animating. Now, there is for that pose, you're focused on something and you don't want to turn your head, but you want to glance at something. Then that pose might be useful. Yeah. So it depends. So if I'm looking at something and I want to turn my head, okay, like that, or maybe I'm looking and start my eyes, that could be a moment where, in that case, follow line on off, either will do it, but it really depends on the focus. Are you really locked on to something? Now, there is a trick to this. If you turn this on and just completely lock an eye, oops, don't do that. Let's bring the eyes down here so she's not looking up into the camera. That was creepy. So we've got the eyes here. As I do this, especially when the pupils get smaller, notice how those pupils, there are times when the head moves and they look very locked in place. Like, especially look at the screen right eye here. See how, like right here, as I move the head up and down, it's creepy how locked off it is. It doesn't move. It's just there and it's perfectly positioned. And as you move the head, it's not really moving too much. That is a very creepy feeling. It feels like the eyes are these perfect gimbal, like rotations that are just like what are they called? Like camera stabilizers and stuff. The eyes are just perfectly stabilized so that they don't move. That's not how our eyes move. Our eyes have small adjustments to them, especially when we move our head side to side like this. They will tilt with the head. In this case, you'll see that they don't tilt, which means the further we go, the more the eyes tend to get out of sync, which means you have to rotate them back here. So how do we solve this? Well, your follow align doesn't have to be perfectly on or off. I could set this to 0.8. And now the eyes still stay locked, but see how the control moves ever so slightly to follow the head? I still get that feeling of the eyes focused in one direction. It feels good, but now the eyes never have that moment of weird auto lock where it's perfectly frozen in space. And I can adjust that. Maybe it's, okay, now the eyes are moving a little too much. Let's put it to 0.9. If it's still not quite, I can put it to 0.7. I can play around with that. Same thing with locking into the eyes here. So right now those eyes are perfectly locked, which means she looks like a doll or like a toy where it's just like, these are dead eyes. They don't move in the skull. Or I can set this to 0.1. And now as they move, it's very slight. But see how you can just see that slight adjustment? Let's actually put this 0.3 just so we can see it a little bit more clearly. As the head moves, see how there's this slight adjustment ever so slightly? She looks less dead now. She looks less like a perfect like doll or toy or made out of plastic because there's this slight motion in her eyes. So when I'm animating eyes, I usually set the follow align here to something other than 1 or 0. I set it to a decimal and basically just whatever works best for that situation. So if you do want your character to look really dead and kind of dead-eyed and perfectly still, perfect, set it to 0 or locked off. It really is whatever works best for you. So yeah, that hopefully answers the question in some way. I know it's not like a specific perfect answer, but eye lines are tricky. They really, really are.